The morning air on Kepler Station carried the metallic taste of recycled atmosphere and the faint ozone scent of artificial gravity generators. Emily Rodriguez stepped into the Academy's physical assessment hall, her regulation boots clicking against the polished titanium floor. Around her, the mixed cohort of cadets from 17 different species filled the vast space with a symphony of alien languages, chittering, growling, and harmonic tones that no human throat could produce. She kept her expression neutral as conversations died, and dozens of eyes, some compound, others with vertical pupils, a few that glowed with their own bioluminescence, turned toward her. The only human in advanced combat engineering, she'd grown accustomed to being the center of attention, though it never got easier to bear the weight of their collective skepticism. "Look, the soft skin arrives," rumbled Vorthak, a Kralian whose exoskeleton gleamed like polished obsidian. His mandibles clicked with what passed for amusement among his kind. "I wonder if she'll cry when she fails the strength assessment." A ripple of chittering laughter spread through the nearby Xanthari cluster, their crystalline wings catching the artificial sunlight streaming through the dome's transparent aluminum panels. Emily recognized the sound. It was the same derisive noise they made when discussing primitive technology or inefficient biological systems. Instructor Valdris stepped forward, her 7-foot frame casting a long shadow across the assessment area. The Thessarian's blue-scaled skin shimmered with each movement, and her 4 arms gestured with fluid precision as she addressed the assembled cadets. "Today's assessment will test your problem-solving abilities under physical stress. Each of you will attempt to move the training boulder from point Alpha to point Beta." She indicated 2 glowing markers separated by roughly 50 meters of open floor. "You have 30 minutes. Time efficiency and method creativity will be evaluated alongside pure success." Emily's gaze fixed on the boulder in question, a massive chunk of compressed duranium ore, easily 3 meters in diameter and matte black under the artificial lighting. She estimated its weight at somewhere around 8 tons, maybe more. Her fellow cadets were already sizing it up, their various physiologies apparent in their approaches. Threx, a Gorian whose species was renowned for their incredible physical strength, cracked his knuckles with sounds like breaking tree branches. His biceps were easily twice the circumference of Emily's waist, and his people could bench press small vehicles. Several other species possessed similar advantages. The crystalline Xanthari could temporarily increase their density and mass, while the insectoid Vrak could combine their efforts with perfect coordination. "Perhaps," suggested Kythia, one of the Xanthari whose voice rang like struck crystal, "the human should observe rather than embarrass herself. My species has lifted similar masses since we were juveniles." Emily rolled her shoulders, checking the flexibility of her utility belt and the various tools clipped to it. "I appreciate the concern," she said, her tone carefully measured, "but I'll give it a shot." The condescending tones that followed her statement would have been insulting if she hadn't expected them. Vorthak's mandibles clicked rapidly, the Kralian equivalent of barely suppressed laughter. "With what? Your delicate limbs? Humans have the physical capability of injured Flemish grubs." "At least grubs have the wisdom to avoid impossible tasks," added Zethon, a tall, reed-thin Silurian whose pale green skin held an oily sheen. "This is meant to separate real warriors from whatever humans are supposed to be." Emily nodded thoughtfully, as if seriously considering their observations. She walked a slow circle around the boulder, running her fingers along its rough surface and testing different handholds. The duranium was cold against her palms, and she could feel the incredible density of the material, compact, unyielding, and definitely beyond her ability to lift through brute force. But that was never the plan. While her classmates flexed, postured, and began their attempts with varying degrees of success, Threx managed to shift the boulder about 10 meters before his strength gave out, while a team of 3 Vrak, working in perfect synchronization, moved it another 15. Emily continued her examination. She traced stress patterns in the floor tiles, noted the positioning of support beams overhead, and paid careful attention to the subtle slope of the deck plating. "The human's giving up before she even tries," observed Kithia, with what might have been satisfaction. Wise, if disappointing. Emily straightened, brushing duranium dust from her palms. "Actually, I was just getting started." She unclipped a standard-issue pry bar from her belt. Nothing fancy, just 30 centimeters of hardened steel with a slight curve at one end. Next came a small laser cutter, the kind used for precision work on electronic components. Several cadets exchanged glances that clearly communicated their bewilderment at her tool selection. Is she planning to carve the boulder into smaller pieces? Zethan's tone dripped with mockery. That laser wouldn't cut through duranium in 100 years. Instead of approaching the boulder directly, Emily walked to the nearest support column, a massive pillar of reinforced ceram steel that rose from floor to ceiling. She activated her laser cutter and began making precise cuts in the deck plating around the column's base, her movements careful and deliberate. The beam was indeed too weak to affect duranium, but it sliced through the titanium flooring like butter. "What is the soft skin doing?" rumbled Vorthak, his mandibles stilling as confusion replaced amusement. Emily didn't answer immediately. She was busy calculating angles and distances, her mind running through the physics problems she'd been solving since childhood: leverage ratios, fulcrum positioning, force multiplication, concepts that seemed basic to her but appeared foreign to beings who relied primarily on raw physical power. After several minutes of precise cutting, she had created a series of rectangular slots in the floor around the column. She returned to her toolkit and produced a handful of standard maintenance wedges, simple triangular pieces of hardened alloy used to secure loose panels during spacecraft maintenance. The alien cadets watched in growing bewilderment as Emily inserted the wedges into the slots she'd cut, testing each one to ensure it was seated firmly against the column's base. She adjusted angles with the precision of a chronometer maker, measuring distances with a small rule and making tiny corrections to each wedge's position. "The human appears to be redecorating," Kithia said, her crystalline voice holding a note of uncertainty. Emily finally returned to the boulder, but instead of attempting to lift it directly, she placed one end of her pry bar against its base and began extending the other end toward the column. The bar was too short to reach, but she had anticipated this problem. From her toolkit came a telescoping extension rod, the kind maintenance crews used to reach awkward spaces in air ducts. She locked the extension into place, creating a lever nearly 4 meters long. The fulcrum point she'd chosen was one of the larger wedges, positioned exactly 3.7 meters from the boulder and 0.3 meters from the column. Emily double-checked her measurements, then positioned herself at the far end of her improvised lever. The silence in the assessment hall was complete now, broken only by the hum of environmental systems and the soft whisper of recycled air. Every eye was fixed on the small human woman as she gripped the end of her lever and began to apply steady downward pressure. For a moment, nothing happened. The boulder sat motionless, its massive bulk seemingly indifferent to Emily's efforts. Several aliens began to shift restlessly, mandibles clicking and wings rustling with what might have been second-hand embarrassment. Then the boulder moved. It was subtle at first, just a slight shift, a barely perceptible change in position. But as Emily continued applying pressure, the movement became unmistakable. The 8-ton mass of duranium was sliding across the floor, its movement smooth and steady, despite its incredible weight. Vorthak's mandibles fell silent. Kithia's crystalline form seemed to dim with shock. Even Instructor Valdris straightened, all 4 of her arms going still, as she watched the impossible scene unfolding before her. Emily maintained her steady pressure, walking slowly alongside her lever as the boulder continued its journey across the assessment hall. Her breathing was controlled, her movements efficient, and her expression remained calmly focused as if moving 8-ton masses was something she did every Tuesday. The boulder continued its steady progress across the assessment hall floor, leaving a faint trace in the polished titanium where its immense weight pressed against the surface. Emily's makeshift lever system worked with mechanical precision, each application of force translating into smooth, controlled movement of the duranium mass. The physics were elegant in their simplicity. She was applying roughly 60 kilograms of downward pressure to generate nearly 800 kilograms of lifting force at the boulder's contact point. Around her, the alien cadets had fallen into stunned silence. The only sounds were the soft whisper of Emily's breathing, the barely audible creak of stressed metal from her improvised fulcrum, and the low grinding noise of duranium sliding across titanium. It was a sound none of them had expected to hear today. Zethon was the first to break the spell. "This is impossible," he muttered, his pale green skin taking on a sickly yellow tinge that indicated severe distress among his species. "The mass ratios don't—" "How is she?" "Leverage," Emily said simply, not breaking her rhythm or looking away from the boulder. "Basic mechanical advantage. I'm multiplying my applied force by a factor of roughly 12 through fulcrum positioning." Kythia's crystalline wings vibrated with a frequency that produced a sharp, discordant tone, the Zenthari equivalent of aggressive skepticism. "That's elementary physics. We all understand mechanical principles, but the materials, that pry bar should have snapped under the stress." Emily allowed herself a small smile. "Hardened steel has a tensile strength of about 400 megapascals. My calculations show the maximum stress on the bar at roughly 320 megapascals, well within safety margins. The extension rod is rated for even higher loads. It's designed to support maintenance workers in high-gravity environments." She paused her work for a moment to wipe sweat from her forehead. The physical effort was real enough. She was essentially deadlifting 60 kilograms repeatedly while maintaining perfect form. But it was a sustainable load, something she could maintain for the full 30-minute assessment period if necessary. Threx rumbled forward on his massive legs, his obsidian exoskeleton gleaming as he studied Emily's setup with new interest. The Gorian's approach to problems was typically direct: identify obstacle, apply overwhelming force, repeat as necessary. Watching a human solve through indirect means was clearly causing him to recalculate his assumptions. "The wedges," he said, his voice carrying the grinding undertones characteristic of his species. "How did you know the floor could support that concentration of force?" Emily gestured toward the support column with her free hand, never stopping her steady pressure on the lever. "Building specifications are public record. This station was designed to handle emergency loads up to 15 times standard gravity. The support columns are rated for vertical loads of up to 12,000 tons each. My wedges are transferring maybe 50 tons of horizontal force to the column base, well within tolerances." Instructor Valdris moved closer, her forearms crossed in a gesture that conveyed deep thought among the Thessarian species. Her scaled skin had shifted from blue to a deeper indigo, indicating heightened interest and evaluation mode. "You researched the station's structural specifications?" "Standard practice," Emily replied, guiding the boulder past the halfway point of its journey. "Before operating in any environment, you should understand its limitations and capabilities, infrastructure specs, environmental tolerances, emergency procedures, local regulations, basic due diligence." Several of the alien cadets exchanged glances that conveyed a mixture of surprise and grudging respect. The concept of extensive preparation for routine activities was apparently foreign to species that relied primarily on their natural advantages. Vorthak clicked his mandibles in what Emily had learned to recognize as the Kralian expression of deep consideration. "Your species is methodical." "We have to be," Emily said, adjusting her grip on the lever as the boulder approached the final quarter of its journey. "We're not the strongest, fastest, or most durable species in the galaxy. We can't see into multiple spectrums, communicate telepathically, or manipulate matter at the molecular level. What we can do is think problems through, plan ahead, and use tools effectively. She paused her movement for a moment and pulled out a small water bottle, taking a measured sip before continuing. The break wasn't because she was tired, though the sustained effort was definitely working her muscles, but because she wanted to emphasize her point. While her classmates watched, she used the pause to make a minor adjustment to one of her wedges, fine-tuning the fulcrum position to optimize the mechanical advantage. "Among my people," she continued, resuming her steady pressure, "there's an old saying, work smarter, not harder. We've learned to multiply our capabilities through preparation, planning, and the intelligent application of basic principles." Kithia's crystalline form brightened slightly, a sign of dawning comprehension. "This is why humans excel at engineering and systems design. You approach problems from angles we don't naturally consider." Emily nodded while maintaining her rhythm. "Different species, different strengths. Gorians are phenomenally strong. Xanthari can manipulate their physical properties. Kralians have incredible resilience and damage resistance. Humans are adaptable. We find ways to work around our limitations." The boulder was now just 10 meters from its destination. Emily's improvised lever system had performed flawlessly, moving the massive duranium mass with steady, controlled precision. Her technique had been so smooth that several of the alien cadets were now studying her setup with professional interest, trying to understand the principles behind what they'd witnessed. Zethon approached cautiously, his pale green skin still showing signs of stress coloration. "The laser cutter," he said slowly. "You used it to create precise anchor points for your fulcrum system. But how did you calculate the exact positioning? The angles seem optimal." Emily slowed her pace as the boulder approached the final meters of its journey. Engineering school covers applied physics pretty thoroughly: lever calculations, force vectors, material stress analysis. It's all standard coursework. Plus, I've been tinkering with mechanical systems since I was about 8 years old. My father was a maintenance engineer on cargo haulers. She made a final adjustment to her lever position, ensuring the boulder would come to rest exactly at the designated point beta. The massive duranium sphere settled into place with a soft thud that seemed to echo through the suddenly quiet assessment hall. Emily straightened, rolling her shoulders to work out the tension from 30 minutes of sustained effort. She began disassembling her lever system, returning each component to its proper place on her utility belt. The laser cutter went back into its holster, the extension rod collapsed to its compact storage configuration, and the pry bar clipped neatly to her belt loop. The silence stretched for several long moments as the alien cadets processed what they'd witnessed. Instructor Valdris approached the boulder, running one of her scaled hands along its surface and checking its position relative to the target marker. Her expression was unreadable, but Emily caught the subtle signs of approval in the way the Thessarian's crest feathers settled into a more relaxed configuration. "Time elapsed," Valdris announced. 28 minutes, 15 seconds. "Method: unconventional but effective. Innovation rating." She paused, consulting her evaluation pad. "Exceptional." Instructor Valdris's evaluation seemed to break whatever spell had held the assessment hall in silence. Suddenly, the space erupted with a cacophony of alien voices as cadets from different species began discussing what they'd witnessed in rapid, excited exchanges. Emily found herself at the center of a growing circle of curious aliens, each trying to understand the principles behind her success. Threx was examining the wedge points where Emily had created her fulcrum system, his massive hands surprisingly gentle as he traced the precise cuts she'd made in the floor plating. "The angles," he rumbled, his voice carrying undertones of professional admiration. "Each wedge is positioned to distribute force evenly across the column base. This isn't improvised, this is engineered." Kithia's crystalline wings chimed softly as she studied the abandoned lever system. The extension rod connection points show no stress fractures, no deformation. You calculated the load distribution perfectly. Her tone held a note that Emily was beginning to recognize as respect, though filtered through Zenthari concepts of crystalline perfection. Emily finished stowing her tools and brushed duranium dust from her hands. "It's not magic," she said, addressing the growing crowd of curious aliens. "Basic mechanical engineering principles, applied with standard maintenance tools. Any of you could do the same thing with enough preparation." Vorthak's mandibles clicked in a pattern Emily had learned, indicated deep skepticism. "We possess the knowledge of leverage and fulcrums, but to see the solution," he gestured at the now stationary boulder with one clawed appendage. "To envision this approach while others consider only brute force applications, this is not common thinking." A new voice entered the conversation, Yexis, one of the few Zentarians in the advanced cohort. Her species was renowned for their analytical abilities and mathematical precision, making her opinion particularly relevant. "The human demonstrated multiple cognitive processes simultaneously," she observed, her translator rendering her musical speech into standard galactic. "Environmental assessment, materials analysis, structural engineering, and applied physics, all integrated into a coherent solution." Emily found herself genuinely surprised by the intensity of their interest. "Don't your species use tools and mechanical advantage?" "Of course," replied Zethon, though his pale green coloration still showed traces of stress patterns. "But we tend to use tools that amplify our existing strengths. Gorians use powered exoskeletons to become even stronger. Zenthari use resonance amplifiers to enhance their natural crystalline abilities. We don't typically use tools to completely circumvent our limitations." Instructor Valdris approached the group, her scaled skin now showing the deep blue coloration that indicated high-level analysis mode among Thessarians. "This raises interesting questions about problem-solving approaches across species," she said, her forearms gesturing in complex patterns that emphasized her words. "Cadet Rodriguez has demonstrated what human cognitive scientists call lateral thinking, approaching problems from unexpected angles rather than direct confrontation." Emily nodded, beginning to understand why her solution had generated such intense interest. "In human military history, we call it asymmetric warfare. When you can't match your opponent's strengths directly, you find ways to make those strengths irrelevant or even turn them into weaknesses." She gestured toward the boulder, which sat motionless at its designated target point. "I couldn't lift 8 tons with muscle power, so I found a way to move 8 tons without lifting it. The problem was never really about strength, it was about moving mass from point A to point B." Threx's obsidian exoskeleton caught the artificial light as he turned to study Emily with new attention. "Your species has fought wars against physically superior opponents?" "Constantly," Emily said with a wry smile. "Humans aren't the apex predators on our homeworld. We competed with creatures that were stronger, faster, and had better natural weapons. We survived by being smarter, more cooperative, and more adaptable." Kithia's crystalline form pulsed with soft light, a sign of intense curiosity among her species. "This explains human technological development patterns. Your innovations often focus on force multiplication rather than capability enhancement." Emily was beginning to enjoy the discussion. It wasn't often that she had the opportunity to explain human thinking patterns to genuinely interested alien minds. We have a saying, "Necessity is the mother of invention." When you need to solve problems but lack the obvious tools, you get creative. Yexes approached closer, her mathematical mind clearly working through implications. "This suggests human military and engineering doctrines may be fundamentally different from other galactic species. Less emphasis on overwhelming capability, more emphasis on adaptive solutions." "That's actually accurate," Emily admitted. "Human military academies spend a lot of time on what we call thinking outside the box, finding unconventional solutions to conventional problems." Instructor Valdris made a note on her evaluation pad, her crest feathers showing increased interest patterns. This has implications for our tactical studies curriculum. If human approaches to problem solving are genuinely distinct from standard galactic norms, we should be incorporating these methodologies into our training programs. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of another instructor, Commander Corvash, a massive draconian whose species was renowned for their strategic thinking and battlefield command abilities. His scaled hide was a deep crimson that indicated high-level evaluation mode, and his golden eyes swept the assessment area with professional interest. "I observed the final portion of the assessment," he said, his voice carrying the harmonic undertones characteristic of his species. "Cadet Rodriguez, your solution was unprecedented." Emily straightened into a proper attention stance, though she kept her expression neutral. Commander Corvash had a reputation for being particularly challenging toward human cadets, believing their species lacked the proper warrior spirit for advanced tactical positions. "Sir?" she acknowledged simply. Corvash approached the boulder, studying the mechanical setup Emily had used with obvious professional interest. "In 40 years of military instruction across dozens of species and hundreds of tactical scenarios, I have never seen a cadet solve this particular assessment through mechanical advantage." He paused, his golden eyes fixing on Emily with uncomfortable intensity. It was not intended to be solvable through engineering. The assessment hall fell silent again, alien cadets sensing the potential for confrontation. Emily maintained her position, but felt her pulse quicken slightly. This was the moment that would determine whether her unconventional success would be celebrated or criticized. "The assessment parameters," Emily said carefully, specified moving the boulder from point alpha to point beta within 30 minutes, with evaluation based on efficiency and creativity. No restrictions were placed on methodology. Commander Corvash's scaled lips curved in what might have been a smile, though it was difficult to tell with draconian facial expressions. "Correct. You identified an unstated assumption that the problem required physical strength and chose to ignore it in favor of a more effective approach." He turned to address the assembled cadets, his voice carrying easily through the large space. "This is a critical lesson for all of you. In real combat situations, in actual crisis scenarios, the enemy will not inform you of their assumptions about your capabilities. Your survival may depend on your ability to exceed those assumptions in unexpected ways." Commander Corvash's words seemed to shift the entire atmosphere in the assessment hall. What had begun as curiosity about Emily's unconventional solution was rapidly evolving into something resembling a tactical seminar. The alien cadets were no longer looking at her as an amusing anomaly, but as a potential source of genuine insight. "Cadet Rodriguez," the commander continued, his golden eyes gleaming with what Emily was learning to recognize as draconian approval, "walk us through your decision-making process, from the moment you entered this hall to the completion of your solution." Emily took a breath, organizing her thoughts. Being the center of this much focused attention from some of the galaxy's most intellectually gifted species was both exhilarating and slightly intimidating. "Initial assessment was environmental and tactical," she began. "I cataloged available resources, tools, materials, structural elements, and potential anchor points. Simultaneously, I evaluated the stated objective versus implied assumptions." She gestured toward the boulder. The obvious assumption was that this was a test of raw physical capability, but the stated parameters only required moving the mass from one point to another within a specified time frame, no restrictions on methodology. Vorthak's mandibles clicked in patterns Emily had learned indicated deep consideration. "You assumed the test was designed with multiple solutions?" "Not assumed, hoped," Emily corrected. "In human educational systems, problems that appear to have only one solution often reveal alternative approaches upon closer examination. It's a common teaching technique. Commander Korvash nodded approvingly. Continue. Once I identified the lever approach as potentially viable, I needed to verify material capabilities and structural tolerances. The station's engineering specifications are public record. 15 minutes of research confirmed that the support columns could handle the load transfer. Yexis, the Zentorian analyst, raised one of her graceful appendages. The precision of your fulcrum positioning suggests mathematical calculation rather than estimation. Did you perform stress analysis in real time? Emily smiled slightly. Mental math mostly. Lever calculations are straightforward once you know the basic principles. Applied force times distance from fulcrum equals resistance force times its distance from fulcrum. Simple algebra. Several alien cadets exchanged glances that conveyed a mixture of amazement and recalculation. What Emily considered simple algebra was apparently more complex than they'd initially assumed. Kythia's crystalline wings vibrated with curiosity. Your species teaches these calculations as basic education. Engineering principles are pretty standard in human technical education, Emily confirmed. We start learning basic physics and mathematics around age 6, applied mechanics by 10 or 12. Most humans can handle elementary force calculations by the time we reach academy age. The silence that followed this statement was profound. Emily realized she might have inadvertently revealed something significant about human educational standards. Commander Korvash's expression had shifted to what Emily recognized as intense interest. Cadet Rodriguez, you're stating that mathematical analysis of mechanical systems is routine knowledge among your species. Among humans with technical backgrounds, yes, sir. We don't have the natural physical advantages that other species possess. Tool use and mechanical problem solving are survival skills. Threx's massive form shifted as he processed this information. On Goria, only specialized engineers learn such calculations. Physical strength is sufficient for most applications. Same with crystalline resonance principles among Zenthari, added Kythia. Our natural abilities make complex tool use unnecessary for most tasks. Emily was beginning to understand the broader implications of what she'd revealed. Human reliance on tools and mathematical analysis wasn't just different, it was apparently unique among galactic species, at least in terms of how widespread such knowledge was among the general population. Instructor Valdris moved to the center of the group, her 4 arms gesturing in complex patterns that indicated high-level synthesis mode. This suggests human educational priorities have evolved to compensate for physical limitations through mathematical and engineering literacy. Fascinating adaptation. Commander Korvash was making notes on a military-grade evaluation pad, his golden eyes moving between Emily and the assembled cadets. Cadet Rodriguez, in your assessment, how many humans of your generation would have been able to solve this problem using similar methods? Emily considered the question carefully. Maybe 60 or 70% of those with technical backgrounds. The physics principles are standard curriculum, and improvised tool use is pretty common among maintenance crews, engineers, and military personnel. The silence that followed was even more profound than before. Emily realized she might have just revealed something about human capabilities that the galactic community hadn't previously understood. Zethon's pale green skin had shifted to a deeper shade that indicated intense concentration. You're suggesting that mathematical problem solving and mechanical innovation are widespread capabilities among humans, not specialized skills restricted to experts? That's accurate, Emily confirmed, though she was beginning to sense the significance of this revelation. Commander Korvash's evaluation pad chimed softly as he completed his notes. Ladies, gentlemen, and varied beings, he announced to the assembled cadets, you have just witnessed a demonstration of what military analysts call force multiplier doctrine. A single individual, using readily available tools and standard educational knowledge, achieved results that would typically require specialized equipment or superior physical capabilities. He gestured toward Emily's improvised lever system. More importantly, you have observed problem-solving methodologies that may be fundamentally different from your species' standard approaches. This has implications for tactical doctrine, engineering cooperation, and strategic planning. Threx's obsidian exoskeleton gleamed as he turned to study Emily with new respect. The soft skin is not weak. Her species is differently strong. Emily found herself oddly moved by the Gorian's revised assessment. We all have our advantages, Threx. Yours are just more obvious. Kythia approached closer, her crystalline form pulsing with soft harmonics that indicated deep curiosity. Would you be willing to demonstrate other human problem-solving approaches for educational purposes? Before Emily could respond, Commander Corvash interjected. An excellent suggestion, Cadet Kythia. Cadet Rodriguez, report to Advanced Tactical Scenarios tomorrow at 0800 hours. We have some additional assessments that might benefit from your perspective. Emily straightened. Yes, sir. The commander's scaled features arranged themselves into something that might have been satisfaction. Dismissed, all cadets. Consider today's demonstration as you prepare for upcoming assessments. Sometimes the most effective solutions are the least obvious ones. As the alien cadets began to disperse, Emily found herself surrounded by individuals who had entered the day, considering her a curiosity, and were leaving with something approaching professional respect. The transformation was remarkable, and it had all started with moving a boulder that everyone assumed was unmovable. The following morning arrived with the distinctive hum of Kepler Station's artificial dawn cycle as environmental controls gradually increased illumination and adjusted atmospheric composition to simulate planetary morning conditions. Emily arrived at the Advanced Tactical Scenarios classroom 15 minutes early, a habit ingrained through years of human military training protocols. The classroom itself was impressive. A holographic simulation chamber capable of generating complex three-dimensional environments for tactical training. Banks of monitoring equipment lined the walls, and the center of the room contained a raised platform surrounded by observation stations. It was clearly designed to accommodate multiple species with varying physical requirements. Commander Corvash was already present, studying data displays that showed complex tactical scenarios. His crimson scales caught the simulated morning light as he turned to acknowledge Emily's arrival. Punctual, he observed with approval. Human trait? Military training, sir. My instructors believed that being early demonstrated respect for the mission and fellow service members. Corvash made a note on his evaluation pad. Interesting cultural adaptation. Most species view time as fluid. Arrival within the general time frame is considered sufficient. Other cadets began arriving over the next several minutes. Emily was pleased to see familiar faces from yesterday's assessment. Threx, Kythia, Vorthak, Yexis, and Zethon among them. Their attitudes toward her had clearly shifted overnight from dismissive curiosity to genuine interest. Today, Commander Corvash announced once all cadets were assembled, we will explore unconventional approaches to tactical problems. Yesterday's demonstration by Cadet Rodriguez has prompted a re-evaluation of our standard assessment methodologies. The holographic system activated, filling the chamber with a detailed three-dimensional representation of an urban environment. Buildings rose around them in photorealistic detail, complete with vehicles, civilian populations, and environmental conditions that felt remarkably authentic. Scenario parameters, Corvash continued, are as follows. A civilian population center has been occupied by hostile forces possessing superior firepower and defensive positions. Standard assault tactics would result in unacceptable casualties. Your mission is to neutralize the threat while minimizing harm to non-combatants. Emily studied the holographic cityscape, automatically cataloging tactical features. The hostile forces had chosen their positions well, elevated firing positions, overlapping fields of fire, and civilian populations positioned to complicate any direct assault. It was a classic asymmetric warfare scenario designed to negate superior firepower through tactical positioning. Threx stepped forward, his massive frame casting shadows across the holographic terrain. Direct assault appears inadvisable. Enemy positions are well fortified and overlapping. Kythia's crystalline wings chimed softly as she analyzed the scenario. Crystalline resonance could destabilize their defensive structures, but civilian casualties would be significant. Vorthak's mandibles clicked in patterns indicating strategic consideration. Kralian infiltration tactics could succeed, but timeline would be extensive. Civilian populations would remain at risk during operation duration. Emily continued her analysis while her classmates discussed conventional approaches. The scenario was clearly designed to challenge standard tactical thinking, much like yesterday's Boulder assessment had challenged assumptions about physical capability. "What if we don't engage the hostile forces directly?" she suggested. The alien cadets turned toward her with expressions of curiosity. Commander Corvash's golden eyes gleamed with interest. "Explain your thinking, Cadet Rodriguez." Emily moved to the holographic display controls, highlighting specific features in the urban environment. The hostile forces are relying on superior defensive positions and civilian shields to maintain their advantage, but they still require basic logistical support: power, water, communications, and food supplies. She began marking infrastructure elements throughout the cityscape. If we can identify and neutralize their supply lines without direct confrontation, we can force them to abandon their positions voluntarily. Yexus's mathematical mind immediately grasped the implications. Siege tactics, but the timeline. Not siege, Emily corrected. Systematic infrastructure disruption. Look at the power grid. 3 main distribution nodes serve the occupied sectors. Disable those, and their defensive systems lose primary power. She continued highlighting targets throughout the holographic city. Water treatment facility here supplies the entire district. Communications relay on that building connects their forces to external command. Food distribution center here serves both civilian and military populations. Threx studied the marked targets with growing understanding. Attacking infrastructure rather than personnel. Indirect approach to force direct results. Exactly. And because we're targeting systems rather than people, civilian casualties remain minimal, while hostile forces lose their operational advantages. Commander Corvash was making extensive notes, his scaled features showing what Emily had learned to recognize as high-level evaluation mode. Continue your analysis, Cadet Rodriguez. How would you execute such operations? Emily manipulated the holographic display to show detailed views of each target location. Power grid disruption can be accomplished through precisely placed charges at transformer stations, technical sabotage rather than destructive bombardment. Water treatment can be temporarily disabled through control system manipulation. Communications relay is vulnerable to signal jamming or targeted electromagnetic pulse. She paused, studying the tactical situation from multiple angles. The key is coordination and timing. All systems need to be compromised simultaneously to prevent adaptive responses from hostile forces. Kythia's crystalline form pulsed with understanding. This requires detailed intelligence about infrastructure systems, precise timing, and technical expertise rather than overwhelming firepower. Human approach to problem solving, Vorthak observed, his mandibles clicking with what Emily now recognized as approval. Indirect solutions to direct problems. Commander Corvash gestured for Emily to continue her presentation. Develop the operational timeline, Cadet Rodriguez. Emily felt a familiar excitement as she dove deeper into the tactical problem. This was exactly the type of challenge she'd trained for, complex scenarios requiring creative solutions rather than brute force approaches. Phase 1. Intelligence gathering. We need detailed schematics of all infrastructure systems, current operational status, and security measures. Timeline. 24 to 48 hours, using orbital reconnaissance and local resistance contacts. She manipulated the holographic controls to display movement patterns and security rotations around key infrastructure points. Phase 2. Insertion teams, small units with technical specialists, deployed simultaneously to all target locations. Gorian strength for physical access, Xanthari crystalline abilities for electronic systems manipulation, Kralian stealth capabilities for security bypass. Threx's massive head nodded approvingly. Combined species capabilities, each contributing optimal strengths. Phase 3. Coordinated execution, all targets compromised within a 6-hour window to prevent adaptive responses. Power grid first, creates confusion and degrades defensive systems. Communications second, prevents coordination between hostile units. Water and food supply last, forces immediate evacuation decisions. Emily paused to study the tactical display, running through potential complications and contingency plans. Phase 4. Psychological pressure. Once infrastructure is compromised, we broadcast surrender terms, emphasizing our capability to restore services in exchange for peaceful withdrawal. Commander Korvash's evaluation pad was working overtime as he recorded Emily's tactical breakdown. Timeline for mission completion? 72 hours from initiation to hostile force withdrawal, Emily replied confidently. Minimal casualties, infrastructure damage repairable within 2 weeks, civilian population never directly threatened. The silence in the holographic chamber was profound as alien cadets processed what they'd witnessed. Emily had taken a scenario designed to test conventional military thinking and restructured it around principles that none of them had initially considered. Yexis was the first to speak, her mathematical mind clearly working through the operational logistics. This approach requires unprecedented coordination between multiple species and specialties. The planning complexity alone is manageable with proper preparation and clear communication protocols, Emily finished. Human military doctrine emphasizes extensive planning and multi-contingency preparation. We call it failing to plan is planning to fail. Zethon's pale green skin showed patterns of intense curiosity. Your species approaches warfare as a problem-solving exercise rather than a test of strength or courage. Emily considered the question carefully. We approach warfare as something to be won efficiently with minimal cost to all involved. Courage and strength are important, but they're tools in service of larger strategic objectives. Kythia's crystalline wings produced soft harmonics that indicated deep contemplation. This explains human success in galactic conflicts despite apparent physical disadvantages. You optimize for strategic rather than tactical superiority. We optimize for victory, Emily said simply. How we achieve it depends on the specific situation and available resources. Commander Korvash deactivated the holographic scenario, returning the chamber to its normal configuration. His golden eyes swept across the assembled cadets with expressions that conveyed both satisfaction and recalculation. Ladies, gentlemen, and varied beings, he announced, you have just observed tactical doctrine that fundamentally challenges standard galactic military thinking. Cadet Rodriguez has demonstrated approaches that prioritize strategic objectives over conventional combat methodologies. He gestured toward Emily, his scaled features showing clear approval. More significantly, she has shown how diverse species capabilities can be integrated into coherent operational plans that maximize each participant's strengths while minimizing individual weaknesses. Threx's obsidian exoskeleton caught the chamber lighting as he turned to address Emily directly. Would human military doctrine support combined species tactical units? Emily nodded enthusiastically. Absolutely. Human military history is full of successful coalition operations. We've learned that diverse capabilities and perspectives generally produce better outcomes than homogeneous approaches. Vorthak's mandibles clicked in patterns Emily was learning to associate with strategic consideration. This suggests possibilities for enhanced galactic defense cooperation, different species contributing optimal capabilities under unified command structures. Commander Corvash was making extensive notes, his expression indicating high-level strategic thinking. Cadet Rodriguez, you will report to the Strategic Planning Division tomorrow at 0900 hours. Admiral Thixis wishes to discuss human tactical doctrine in greater detail. Emily straightened in surprise. Admiral Thixis was the commanding officer of Kepler Station, a legendary Aquarian strategist whose tactical innovations had shaped galactic military thinking for decades. Being summoned for a personal meeting was unprecedented for a first-year cadet. Yes, sir, she managed. Furthermore, Corvash continued, effective immediately, you are assigned as tactical consultant to advanced combat engineering scenarios. Your responsibility will be developing unconventional solution approaches for standard assessment problems. The alien cadets around her showed expressions of amazement and, in some cases, what might have been envy. Emily found herself both thrilled and slightly overwhelmed by the rapid transformation in her academic standing. Kythia approached as the other cadets began to disperse. Your demonstration today was illuminating. Would you be willing to discuss human problem-solving methodologies in greater detail for academic purposes? Emily smiled, remembering how the same Zenthari had suggested just 2 days ago that she should observe rather than embarrass herself. I'd be happy to share what I know. Admiral Thixis's office occupied an entire section of Kepler Station's command level, with transparent aluminum windows offering spectacular views of the nearby nebula that gave the system its distinctive purple-tinged lighting. The space was designed to accommodate multiple species, with adjustable furniture, varying atmospheric zones, and communication equipment capable of handling dozens of different physiological requirements. Emily stood at attention before the Admiral's desk, trying to maintain her composure while being studied by one of the galaxy's most respected military minds. Admiral Thixis herself was impressive, an Aquarian whose bioluminescent skin patterns shifted with her thoughts, creating a constantly changing display of strategic consideration. At ease, Cadet Rodriguez, the Admiral said, her translated voice carrying harmonic undertones that conveyed both authority and genuine curiosity. Your recent demonstrations have generated considerable interest among the faculty. Emily relaxed slightly, but maintained professional bearing. Thank you, Admiral. Commander Corvash's reports describe tactical thinking that challenges fundamental assumptions about problem-solving approaches. I'm curious about the broader implications. The Admiral's skin patterns shifted to deeper blues and greens, indicating high-level analysis mode. Is your approach representative of human military doctrine, or are you an exceptional individual? Emily considered the question carefully. My training is fairly standard for human military academy graduates, Admiral. The specific techniques I've demonstrated are taught in basic engineering and tactical courses throughout our educational system. The Admiral's bioluminescent patterns brightened with interest. Elaborate on this educational standardization. Human children typically begin learning basic physics and mathematics around age 6, Emily explained. By 10 or 12, most students understand fundamental engineering principles, leverage, force multiplication, systems analysis. Military academies build on this foundation with tactical applications and advanced problem-solving methodologies. Admiral Thixis made notes on a crystalline data pad that resonated with her bioluminescent patterns. You're describing educational priorities that appear unique among galactic species. Most civilizations focus early education on developing natural capabilities rather than compensating for limitations. Emily nodded. We had to develop differently. Humans aren't physically superior to most galactic species, so our survival strategies evolved around tool use, cooperation, and analytical thinking. This explains recent observations from mixed species operations, the Admiral mused, her skin patterns shifting to indicate strategic synthesis. Human units consistently achieve objectives through methods that other species find unexpected. She activated a holographic display that filled the office with tactical data from recent galactic conflicts, battle reports, strategic analyses, and operational summaries created a three-dimensional web of military information. In the Vegan border conflicts, human-led coalition forces achieved victory ratios of 3.7 to 1, despite being outnumbered and outgunned, Admiral Thixus continued. The standard analysis attributed this to superior human technology. Your demonstrations suggest alternative explanations. Emily studied the tactical data with professional interest. The human victories showed patterns she recognized from her academy training: indirect approaches, infrastructure targeting, coalition coordination, and extensive pre-operational planning. Human military doctrine emphasizes what we call asymmetric advantages, she explained. When direct confrontation is disadvantageous, we find ways to change the nature of the conflict itself. The Admiral's bioluminescent patterns pulsed with understanding. Similar to your Boulder assessment approach, rather than competing in areas where you're disadvantaged, you redefine the problem to utilize your actual strengths. Exactly, Admiral. Admiral Thixus manipulated the holographic display to focus on specific battle reports. These tactical innovations, infrastructure targeting, multi-species coordination, psychological warfare, are these standard human approaches? Emily nodded. Core curriculum at most human military academies. We study historical examples from pre-spaceflight conflicts through contemporary galactic operations. The principles remain consistent even as technology evolves. The Admiral's skin patterns shifted to indicate high-level decision-making mode. Cadet Rodriguez, I'm authorizing a significant change to your academic program. Effective immediately, you're being transferred to the strategic planning track with a focus on developing integrated doctrine for multi-species operations. Emily felt a surge of excitement mixed with apprehension. The strategic planning track was typically reserved for final-year cadets with exceptional academic records. Furthermore, Admiral Thixus continued, you'll be working directly with my staff to analyze human tactical doctrine and develop training protocols for other species. Your first assignment will be creating assessment scenarios that test adaptive problem-solving rather than natural capabilities. The implications were staggering. Emily was being asked to help reshape how the galactic military approached tactical training and strategic thinking. Admiral, she said carefully, I should point out that I'm just one human cadet. My perspective may not represent the full range of human military thinking. Admiral Thixus's bioluminescent patterns brightened with what Emily was learning to recognize as Aquarian amusement. Perhaps, but you're the human cadet who moved an 8-ton boulder with a pry bar and solved a tactical scenario through infrastructure analysis. Your perspective is exactly what we need. Emily straightened. I understand, Admiral. I won't disappoint you. I'm certain you won't. Report to Strategic Planning Division tomorrow at 0700 hours. Commander Korvash will be your primary liaison, with additional support from faculty representing major galactic species. The Admiral paused, her skin pattern shifting to indicate personal rather than professional communication. Off the record, Cadet Rodriguez, your demonstrations have forced us to reconsider fundamental assumptions about capability assessment and species integration. This could significantly impact galactic military doctrine. Emily felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. What had started as a simple assessment problem had somehow evolved into a position of genuine influence within the galactic military hierarchy. As she prepared to leave, Admiral Thixus spoke once more. One final question, Cadet. In your opinion, what would happen if human problem-solving approaches were taught systematically to other species? Emily considered the question carefully. Based on what I've observed here, Admiral, I think other species would develop new capabilities while retaining their natural advantages. Gorians would become stronger and smarter. Xanthari would combine crystalline abilities with analytical thinking. Kralians would add strategic planning to their natural resilience. The Admiral's bioluminescent patterns pulsed with deep satisfaction, enhanced individual capabilities leading to superior coalition performance, exactly what our strategic projections suggested. Emily left the Admiral's office with her mind racing through implications and possibilities. In just 3 days, she'd gone from being the weakest cadet in her cohort to becoming a strategic consultant on galactic military doctrine. The transformation seemed impossible, but it had happened through the same principles she'd used to move the Boulder, identifying the real problem, using available resources creatively, and refusing to accept apparent limitations as permanent constraints. That evening, Emily found herself in the station's observation lounge, looking out at the star-filled expanse beyond Kepler Station. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and responsibilities that she'd never imagined when she first applied to the Galactic Military Academy. Threx approached from behind, his massive footsteps unmistakable on the deck plating. The soft skin contemplates her victories. Emily smiled at the Gorian's continued use of the nickname, though his tone had shifted from mockery to something approaching affection. Just thinking about tomorrow, Threx. Tomorrow brings new obstacles to overcome, he rumbled, settling his massive frame into a reinforced chair designed for his species. But you will find unexpected solutions, as always. Kythia arrived moments later, her crystalline form chiming softly as she moved. The human who taught us that strength comes in many forms, she said, her translated voice carrying harmonics of respect. Soon, other cadets from various species had gathered in the lounge. Vorthak, Yexis, Zethon, and others who had witnessed Emily's demonstrations. They weren't there to study her anymore, Emily realized. They were there as friends and colleagues, united by shared experiences and mutual respect. To leverage, Threx announced, raising a glass of the synthetic alcohol that his species could metabolize safely. To leverage, the others chorused, including Emily. As she looked around at the diverse group of beings who had become her companions, Emily reflected on the events of the past few days. She'd entered the academy as an outsider, someone whose species was considered physically inadequate for serious military roles, but by refusing to accept those limitations and finding ways to apply her actual strengths, she'd not only succeeded, but had begun changing how success itself was defined. The Boulder had been just the beginning. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to demonstrate that strength came in many forms, and that the most effective solutions often came from the most unexpected directions. Outside the observation lounge windows, the stars wheeled in their eternal patterns, indifferent to the small dramas playing out on Kepler Station. But within the station, something significant had changed. The galaxy's military was beginning to learn that human approaches to problem-solving offered more than just interesting alternatives. They offered genuine advantages that could reshape strategic thinking across species. Emily sipped her drink and contemplated the future, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, she would meet them the same way she'd moved the Boulder, by understanding the real problem, using the tools available, and refusing to accept that anything was truly impossible. The human who had been mocked for her weak muscles had become the cadet who taught the galaxy about the power of leverage, both mechanical and intellectual. And this was only the beginning.